And Labour has pledged to fix 1 million potholes every year if they're elected on the 4th of July.
They say they'll turn the tide on the neglect of the UK's roads. The party claims pothole damage costs drivers almost £500 million each and every year.
But the Conservative Party says it will take no lectures on backing drivers, stating that Labour has declared war on motorists across Britain.
Well, let's speak now to the Shadow Secretary of State for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. Jonathan Reynolds joins us now. And Jonathan, before we get on to potholes, I want to turn to the issue of growth. This month, of course, we have seen figures from April that show there was zero growth. And I want to ask you some quick-fire questions on things that an incoming Labour government could do to get growth going. Question number one. Would the Labour Party back a third runway at Heathrow?
Good afternoon, Tom, from Staley Bridge. The questions you're asking, obviously, I think growth is the big question. I think that is why the national finances are where they are at. On aviation expansion anywhere across the UK, there would have to be a case for that. Demand obviously did tail off in the pandemic, but that would have to be consistent.
Is that a yes or a no? That people have been trying to build a third runway at Heathrow for 50 years. Politicians have been stopping private investors from building this thing. Is the Labour Party going to continue to equivocate?
Well, I strongly agree with you that the blocking of private investment is at the heart of our problems. If there was a case for a third runway, and obviously it would have to be in the main privately funded, and that was consistent with our climate and net zero objectives.
Oh no, Jonathan, you've lost me at the first hurdle here. I was so hopeful that you were going to bulldoze through these planning laws, that we were going to build. We're going to have another runway. I mean, it's ridiculous. Our largest airport in the country only has 2 runways. No other country in the world that is in any way developed has that sort of hobbling nature in their largest airports. But maybe we can try another issue, because, of course, our big growth regions are sort of biotech, medtech, all of these new science areas. The lab space that we are restricting around Oxford and Cambridge is a big hobbler for our growth. Now, Michael Gove, to his credit, said that he's going to build upwards of 100,000 new houses in a sort of new town in Cambridge. Will the party back that plan?
And there's going to be very good stuff, very similar to that in the manifesto tomorrow, which I'm not going to preempt, but yes, on the principle of building homes, new towns, having a planning system that delivers that, and a system of investment that brings the private investment.
Hang on, Jonathan, because this really matters. Plonking a new town in the middle of nowhere next to a place that doesn't have high economic activity is not going to have the same economic impact of expanding the place that really wants to build more labs and have more growth. A place like Cambridge, would you commit to expanding Cambridge?
We would want to see Cambridge expand, yes.
Right, those are my questions on growth, but we want to turn to tax as well.
Yes, interested to know about the Labour tax plans. We've heard from Rachel Reeves that no increase in national insurance, no increase in VAT, no increase in income tax. Income tax thresholds will remain as they are, though, so people will be brought into a higher tax band, which isn't good news for a lot of working people. But Rachel Reeves has so far failed to rule out other tax rises, hasn't she? Things like capital gains. Could you rule that out for us?
Well, look, I admire your attempt to preempt the election and have a budget written on air, and I understand the interest in that. But look, there will not be significant tax surprises in the Labour manifesto tomorrow, and the simple reason for that is taxes are already high. I think that's got to be acknowledged. I think the fact that taxes are at a 70-year high, and it's not because public services are particularly good.
Jonathan Reynolds, you're expecting us to believe, though, you're expecting the British public to believe, who you're asking for their votes, you're expecting them to believe that clamping down on non-dom tax loopholes, cracking down more on tax evasion and slapping extra taxes on private schools is going to fund all these massive improvements in our public services. The British people simply won't believe that.
Well, the first steps are funded in that way. So, as you said, the fees on private education fund the state school teachers. The lack of loopholes in the non-dom tax regime changes go into the NHS. But the bigger picture, and what the British public should believe, because they've seen it over the last 14 years with their own eyes, is if the economy had grown anything like it did under the last Labour government for the last 14 years, we wouldn't even need to have this question about tax rises. We would have had billions of pounds more being able to be spent on public services. And that comes back to Tom's point about why have we had such a stagnant economy for 14 years? Why are we not getting the private investment? I mean, why have we got the lowest business investment of any G7 country? It comes to those things, and you will, if you agree with that prescription, like very much what's in the manifesto from the Labour Party tomorrow, because it's not just about things like planning, it's about industrial strategy.
Jonathan Reynolds, Keir Starmer has called himself a socialist. He says that very clearly. You've got the Green Party, who are suggesting now a wealth tax to raise billions to try and fund public services better. Why won't the Labour Party talk about wealth taxes?
Well, the first point is that taxes are high, and I think you've got to acknowledge that. And the second point is, when I look at some of, I'm not here to diss the other political parties in the manifestos, but sometimes I see things, both in the Green and the Lib Dem manifestos, and I think, where in the world is a tax like that performing like that? Where is it bringing in that kind of revenue those other parties have said so? And if you can't see a country comparable to the UK that's bringing in the kind of money they're saying, I think you should be sceptical about it. I think there are, there's a tax on share buybacks in the Lib Dem manifesto I don't think would raise any money. And then, of course, when it comes to the Conservative Party, it's a total fantasy. I mean, the idea you can fund things through, £12 billion of welfare savings, not at all. So look, they've got to put their cases forward. But I'm very confident in what Labour has put out, because I know and can say that each of those first steps can be funded in the way that we've put forward. And I know the things we're putting forward on the longer term future of the economy will make a real difference to businesses investing, getting infrastructure and homes built in the UK.
Now, of course, homes need infrastructure. It's a very important point. And for years, for decades, water companies have been trying to construct new reservoirs in the southeast of England. They've been blocked by local politicians, including local Labour councillors. I'm going to ask you specifically about one reservoir in Oxfordshire, the Abingdon Reservoir. They've been trying to build this thing since the 2000s. Private companies, private money, politicians are blocking them. Would Labour make that a nationally significant project and force it through?
Look, I'm going to be frank, Jim. I actually don't know the specific circumstances of that one, but we will build reservoirs, and there'll be a specific reference to that tomorrow.
Well, there we go. Bit of news there. Jonathan Reynolds, thank you very much for joining us. Look forward to the manifesto.